So I'd like to share our land acknowledgement at the Museums of Mississauga. We'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we work and create is the traditional territory and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional homeland of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee First Nations. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and global Indigenous peoples who call this region home today. We acknowledge all of the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. And we acknowledge that these words only hold meaning if they are followed by thoughtful action and a commitment to listening and learning. As I mentioned, we have different programs happening at the Museums of Mississauga. One of them is Walks of Art, where we have different walks that you can take at the Bradley Museum, at Celebration Square, and at the Living Arts Center in Mississauga. You can visit our website, mississaugaculture.ca/walks, download a free PDF of a scavenger hunt for each of these special walks that we've organized. They are all outdoors and they feature new works by local artists. At the Bradley Museum, we are, for example, showing a neon wildlife walk with artwork by Talia Shuchuk. And these artworks are in the shape of wildlife that have been local to Mississauga in the past and some that are local to Mississauga now in the present. So it's family friendly, gets you outdoors, and it's completely free and self-guided. So have a look at that. Also, this time of year is when we would traditionally celebrate the maple harvest at the Bradley Museum. It's that season where winter is transitioning to spring and we have sap running in the maple trees and we can start to harvest that and make it into maple syrup. So Linda is here tonight as part of the More at the Museum's maple programming, which continues at the Bradley Museum until April 18th. This is all free of charge. We have our on-site walks. We also have pre-booked limited attendance guided tours available. So if you found this event through Eventbrite, we've got those guided tours on our Eventbrite, and you can sign your family up for those. They are limited to 5 people from the same household per tour, and we only allow 2 tours on site at a time. So have a look at that. We do love our history in Mississauga, including our natural history. We are animal lovers and very excited to have Linda here today to explore that connection between our urban landscape and the creatures that inhabit it. So I'm going to take a moment to introduce Linda, who is sitting here very patiently from Animal Services. Give me just one moment. I want to make sure I share your biography, Linda, and I goofed and I didn't print this out ahead of time, so I'm reading it off of my phone. But I'm so pleased that you're here. As I mentioned earlier, I totally fangirl over Linda. She's been part of the animal care and control profession for 39 years, and she has 20 years of field experience and 19 years as a humane educator with Mississauga Animal Services. Her passion has always been animals and the human-animal bond, and she combines this passion with her knowledge and experience to promote animal welfare, community safety, and an understanding and respect for wildlife in our city. And you're going to get a glimpse of that this evening. As I mentioned, we do welcome your questions, so please pop them into the Q&A box. We'll save them at the end. And for now, I'm going to let Linda take it away here. I'm going to pass you the controls, Linda. There we go.
Okay.
That's coming through. Welcome. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. All right. I just want to make sure that we can see our screen okay. Is that we're good? Okay. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is one of my favorite topics, I have to admit. Wildlife has always been of great interest to me, uh, partially because of the diversity that they face in an urban environment. Many of these species thrive and are highly adaptable. They're very resourceful and they're very determined. So, I mean, great lessons for us. So, I hope tonight we can take away a new appreciation and respect for the wildlife that we have in our urban centers. And I guess we'll get started. Oop. And maybe let's see. Okay, we need to. Oh, it's not changed. Oh, here we go. Are we
There
good?
you go. Yeah,
Okay.
we're good. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we'll get started. I guess my background, I have been working with animal services for quite some time. And just to give you some context, we handle more than 50% of our calls are relating to wildlife. So could be sick, injured, orphaned, all kinds of different situational things involving wildlife in our city. So we do have a lot of experience, and certainly we've done, over the years. There's a lot of different things that happen to wild animals in the city. Although they do very well, they also have their challenges. So we try to help where we can. Who would have known in a city the size of Mississauga that we would have such a diversity in wildlife? And I'm very ambitious tonight, so I've got a lot of animals to speak to, and I hope I don't rush too much. But I think it's important that we realize, a lot of times we may catch a glimpse of one of these animals, but sometimes we never see them. And it's good to know that they're there and what they're doing, and if we can help them in any way, there's opportunity for that as well. So I'm going to start with the most controversial is the urban coyote. And it's good to know that urban coyotes, I mean, they're not new to urban areas. In Mississauga, are relatively new, about 25 years before they started coming up on our radar, and they've done quite well. And now they're being studied by biologists as an urban animal, which is very interesting. And they are one of the most successful and highly adaptable of all the wildlife species, in the sense that traditionally coyotes were hunted and tried to eradicate them throughout the Midwest, and they've only expanded their range. So they're here to stay, and the studies that have been done show that they are able to live in urban areas, and they are quite shy, but they're very intelligent and very opportunistic. So we need to know, how to live with them peacefully. One of my things with coyotes is the fact that they are such devoted mates. Coyotes, even studies that they were doing, they would capture one coyote for study, and the mate would actually sit with that coyote and would not leave it while it was caught for collaring or whatever they were doing for their studies. And they were able to catch both of them because it would not leave the other mate. So they are monogamous. They do mate for life if they can, and they're very devoted parents. So this is right about the time that coyotes will be denning in the city, so it's good to know that. We of course have a bylaw for dogs on leash, but very, very important if you're in natural areas or hydro corridors, even schoolyards, anywhere that might be a green space. Coyotes don't differentiate between parks and schoolyards, and they just look for space that they think they're going to have some privacy. And quite often, of course, cities run 24/7, so it's good to know that keeping your dog on leash is a good way to not have an interaction with a coyote. They really are not that interested in interacting with dogs, but they see dogs as another canine rival, so it could be something that they don't like to see another dog running around. And as far as, I guess, in the next month or so, we will have pups being born. And when they're about 8 weeks of age, they actually vacate the den site and will come out in these rendezvous or daycare kind of areas. And so you may come across, if you're out in an area, you may come across some pups kind of wandering around, like in this picture. the parents will leave and go hunting and then come back. So it's just best to leave the area and not to interfere. And eventually, when the pups are old enough, they will follow the parents along in their hunting forays throughout the city. It's amazing how much ground and territory they have to cover to do their hunting and to get enough mice, and that's their main diet to feed the families. They usually disperse the pups in the fall. That's when we get a lot of travelers and juveniles that are crossing roadways and things. However, if there is enough, prey in the area, rodents or rabbits, they may stick it out with a pack, sort of build a little pack, but it's only the alpha pair, the breeding pair, that will have pups the following year. And it is illegal to destroy a den site if we do happen to come across one. And coyotes, they are omnivores. They're, carnivorous as well, but their main diet is rodents. But they eat a variety of everything. And this is why they have done so well living in a city environment, because they will take advantage of anything. As you see in the picture here, if you leave pet food outside or have a bird feeder outside, that may draw coyotes into your backyard. Particularly if rodents and other animals are there, then that would be their natural prey, and it's only natural that they're going to follow that food trail up to properties. And sometimes we'll get calls and people say, look, I see the tracks, they're right around the outside of my house, and I'm quite disturbed by that. And the fact is, they are trying to move around at nighttime when they hope that nobody's around, and they're just looking for the rodents and other things that are probably near our homes or trying to get into our homes when nobody's around. So it makes sense that occasionally we are going to run into them here or there. Another another thing about coyotes is people think that they're a lot bigger than they are. And the largest coyote that we have weighed at Animal Services was 45 pounds, and that was one male that was picked up, unfortunately hit by a car. But the picture is seen here. The one is the collared coyote from the Ministry of Natural Resources, and an 85-pound German Shepherd. And you would think they're comparable in size. The coyote was actually 33 pounds, and again, the shepherd was 85. So you can see where and honestly, when people send us pictures in, I am surprised at how big they look when the photos come in. So it's good to know that they are, they're a lightweight animal. They're not, they're very shy and non-confrontational. And a large dog could probably, do some damage to a coyote, and they know what their limitations are as well. And understanding coyote behavior is probably, I think, one of the most important things. A lot of behavior is mistaken as aggression or bold behavior, when in actuality it's them sort of following along, or they regard the city as their territory, and they have very specific areas that they stay. So families have borders that they utilize, and they do not let other coyote families into those areas. They're very adversarial that way. So when we're walking around with our dogs, even though they view humans as a predator, to a coyote, a dog is another canine, and they just may escort you or kind of watch to see what you're doing in their territory. And it's not that they want to attack someone or, anything like that. But unfortunately, if you run or if you're on a bicycle, it's best to get off the bicycle, just like a dog, um, or just to avoid having them sort of take chase if they think it's something fun to do, or that natural instinct kicks in. Behavior may escalate if there's pups. So occasionally someone will call us and say, I was walking in the park or in hydro corridors, quite an often location that they might sort of border. And this coyote came out of the woods and it was growling and it was coming at me, and that's usually a good indication that there's pups nearby. They are going to defend their pups, and it's an easily de-escalated situation. Just avoid the area, just back away and just leave them, and that should de-escalate. It shouldn't be a problem. They do. They are very vocal. So they this time of year, because we've just finished mating season, now we're getting into denning season, and they will be very vocal. A lot of people think they're only, they vocalize when they're hunting and happy to make a kill, but actually they're very quiet about their kills because they don't want to attract attention to them. But they do it to establish territory so that other coyotes don't move in. Locating pack members, if they're out hunting and they're all in different areas, that's one way of doing it. To throw people off. So if they think that somebody is coming towards them, it's very deceiving where they might be if they're vocalizing. And while hunting, they could, I guess, but technically it's not that they're celebrating a kill. They also like to vocalize, so it's something they do just because it's their innate behavior. And finally, just around disease, they are not really significant carriers of rabies. They are a warm blooded mammal and can. However, they are susceptible to mange, and this poor guy in the picture was very, very advanced stages of mange. We do work with the Toronto Wildlife Centre crews and rescue teams. If you see an animal like this, please report it. Report it to us or call the Toronto Wildlife Centre. They are extremely difficult to trap and capture, even when they're ill like this. So it has to be one that you're seeing on a regular basis, and we've had some success in actually capturing them, and they go to the rehab center and they can treat them for mange and re-release them back into the area. Um, Reporting wildlife feeding, I just wanted to touch on that. We do have an online tool now that you can go on, and if you see a coyote in your area, this helps us kind of keep up with where they're being seen, what they're doing, how often, because sometimes if they're moving into areas on regular basis, it might be related to maybe somebody who's thinking they're helping them by feeding them. And that's where we can run into the most safety issues around coyotes is the bold behavior that's brought on by humans providing food for them. And for pets, it's simply always supervise your pet if your pet's outdoors in whether it's front yard, backyard, whether you've never seen a coyote, and to keep your dog on leash. It's pretty straightforward, and really the only issues we've had in Mississauga is when dogs are off leash or on an extended leash and maybe sniffing around under a bush 20 feet away or where they're out in a yard and they're not supervised. Because coyotes are quite easy to scare away if you're supervising your dog. And I mean, there could be a skunk out there, there could be anything. So it's just handy to supervise. And we'll next move on to the red fox, which red foxes pretty much were decimated from southern Ontario along with coyotes in the early 2000s because of a mange pandemic, and they just disappeared off the radar. It used to be, we never heard any calls on coyotes, and red foxes were every day we would get a call. And then now it kind of flipped where coyotes filled in the territory, and now the red foxes are making a comeback in Mississauga, which is very, very interesting. They do look a lot larger, just like the coyotes, because they have that very fluffy coat. They really only weigh about as much as an average house cat. So anywhere from 10 pounds to 15 pounds would be a very weighty red fox. They are semi-nocturnal, so they can be seen during the daytime. The biggest concern with foxes in the 80s was the red fox, or sorry, rabies in the red fox, because they were susceptible to the Arctic fox strain of rabies. But right now, the ministry has things under control with their oral baiting program. So we really are seeing a large population of healthy foxes. Foxes do tend to den inside properties. Like they love to burrow. That's their denning site, and they may den on somebody's property if they think it may protect them from a predator like a coyote. They think it's just a little more protection for them. Just like the coyote, they are omnivores, so they're eating all kinds of rodents, which is the majority of their diet, and they can have quite a few pups as well. And again, very good parents. They are monogamous. However, the male fox can have another female mate somewhere, but generally they are monogamous and they assist with looking after the kits or pups when they're young and when she's still in the den. Females are called a vixen and the males are called dogs. And generally, they are the red and white, but as you can see in the photo here, this was taken by a resident in Mississauga who shared it with us and beautiful pictures. This was during breeding season, and this was a pair in their backyard, and they would come there quite regularly. And we've got the one with the flecked coat, which is something that can occur, but generally they still have the black legs and the white tip on the tail. Now they do den in, like, burrow type situations, and in the city, we don't have too many, areas that they could go maybe into more naturalized areas, but like I was saying, they do get along quite well in, densely populated areas as well. So occasionally people will call us and say, "Look, there's a family under my shed. Can you please remove it?" And we, in a few months, they will be gone and they'll vacate that area. The pups do disperse, unlike the coyotes. So they don't pack up and, get larger and larger packs. They will disperse naturally. The thing that most people aren't really appreciative of is the female and the male will both bring animals to the pups in your yard if they happen to be in your yard. But generally, that's very rare. Like, we do get the odd call throughout the city that they've actually made a den under a deck or under a shed. But generally, they are looking for more naturalized areas as well. Fox behavior is really interesting because even though they are wild canid, they're very feline-like. They have those kinds of qualities. So they enjoy a good nap in the sun. They might just go up onto a hill and just take a nap in the sun. They jump. They can climb. Their sense of smell is like supersonic, and they can smell rodents and hear rodents under the snow, quite a good depth. And they also have little guard hairs or whiskers on their legs as well as their face, just to navigate their environment a little better when they're moving around in the dark. But again, they are semi-nocturnal, so you will see them during the day as well. And unfortunately, I mean, there's really no safety issues unless they are sick. And again, fortunately, we haven't had any positive rabies in red fox in this area for some time. So there's just a little idea. Again, poor little fox. He's suffering from mange there, so we would try and get him off to a rehab if we could capture him, or have the rehabilitators send out their rescue crews. And the map indicates, you can sort of see in the top, very top, there's some little red triangles, and that's Grey Bruce County, and there's still some positive rabies in red foxes up that way, but down our way, not so much. The green dots actually are all the testing that the ministry is doing right now for raccoon rabies, which is kind of interesting. And so far, we do submit roadkills for that kind of testing, and so far we haven't had any positives, which is great. And our next critter is, I think everybody's had either seen one or had an experience with, the amazing raccoon. Um, Again, I have to give these guys the greatest amount of respect because they have done absolutely, I'm sure, the best out of all the wildlife that we have living in urban areas. And as we know, there's been a lot of media attention around raccoons. Toronto being the raccoon capital of the world, um, we're a neighbor, so it only stands to reason that we probably have a lot of raccoons as well. Again, they're omnivores. They'll eat almost anything. Their tactile and dexterity is amazing. Or two-thirds of their brain, I believe, is dedicated to sensory perception. So um, the unfortunate part for raccoons is they can be destructive, and a lot of people, aren't really appreciative if they're trying to get into their attic, or, trying to have a den somewhere that they really don't want them to have one. They can carry raccoon roundworm, and of course, the raccoon strain of rabies is, sorry, I've got a bug in here, um, is something that they are susceptible to. And again, we've been submitting specimens for quite some time and haven't had any positives here. That's one of the reasons that it's very important that people don't trap and relocate. Number one, it is illegal in Ontario, but also if people, in an area such as Hamilton or Niagara were trapping raccoons and bringing them to Mississauga, and it happens, um, You could relocate a whole series of rabies, outbreak in a whole entire area. And that's one of the reasons that it is illegal to trap and relocate. Um, and they are territorial, so they will defend their territory from interloping raccoons. And anyone who's ever heard a raccoon fight knows how terrible it sounds. There's a lot of screaming and things going on, so it can be quite alarming if you hear that in the middle of the night. Just a little bit of information about some technical information about raccoons, but they do suffer from distemper and a variety of other things, parvovirus, and they can have raccoon roundworm. That's not every raccoon, but that is can be detrimental to humans and pets if it's ingested. And basically, you would have to ingest feces to um, have that as a problem. Family facts: raccoons are excellent parents, and there's mom. Unfortunately, in an urban area, they are very resourceful, but some of the areas they choose are not always our favorite spots. But they could be in lower areas like window wells or under decks. Oftentimes, just disturbing a mom raccoon where you can barely see her little babies there. Um, that's enough to make her relocate them. She doesn't want predators or anybody else having a look, so the next morning they may all be gone. You might see them out during the day. The raccoon on the feeder is actually a nursing mother, so if they don't get enough food to eat during the nightly forays and they have a litter to feed, they may come out during the daytime. And if they're you know if it's normal behavior like this, they're eating, they're on their way somewhere, then they're probably okay. The mother in the bottom picture, she was actually relocating young that had been removed from a certain area. So she didn't waste any time in grabbing them. And it's a one by one process. And she can't count. So she'll just keep coming back till they're all gone. And they usually have several den sites or denning areas that they can use. So preferably we'd rather not seeing her do it during the day, but that was the only opportunity at that time. Raccoon kids are born very helpless. And when they get to be a juvenile stage, like the ones we see in the picture here, sometimes they'll come out on their own and you might think they're orphaned, but in reality, they're just kind of restless teenagers and mom's probably sleeping and they've all decided to come out and take a little, jaunt outside. So oftentimes overnight, the mom will come and collect them and take them on their way. And at about 3 months of age, they're following her around and kind of back in stride with what she wants them to do. There was an albino raccoon that was picked up from it was a wildlife removal company, and they shared the picture with us. And unfortunately, the mom had abandoned it. So whether she thought there was an abnormality, they weren't really sure, which was kind of sad. So just raccoon behavior. You see a raccoon, should you worry about whether it's got rabies or distemper or what's going on? Generally, a healthy raccoon will go for an elevated location to sleep, and during the day, you might see them. It could have gotten caught up foraging for the night and just ended up on your roof or on your windowsill. Generally, they're gone the next day. That's a normal thing. So we would just say, wait until the next day. Um, the one in the tree, he looks like he's, could be something wrong with him, but he's actually just fast asleep and he's just kind of hanging over the branch. So those would be normal situations. It's rare that they ever get stuck in a tree. Sometimes they will stay treed for a day or two. And the two on the bottom, sleeping out in the open like that, I mean, the coat is beautiful. He looks like a very healthy animal, but obviously there is an issue with him. And same with the little guy coming up to the door. He was very disoriented and just kind of staring in. And your first thought might be, well, he's trying to get food. And, maybe that's the case. But um, we knew that there was obviously some neurological problems when we were called out. And they do get into just general trouble. So you can call animal services. The one raccoon, unfortunately, was in a house under construction. So we were able to get her out again, a nursing mother, and re-release her. She was fine. And little guy under the shed, we had to get him out of there without injuring them, obviously. And orphans as well, usually very, very easy to reunite with a parent. So, we just put them out in a box, make sure that they're not going to suffer any kind of exposure, and leave them out and wherever they were. And usually mom will come along and collect them the following night. When raccoons do become a nuisance, there are wildlife removal companies, but generally, if you can keep a house in good repair, make sure there's no rot, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for punky wood. They're looking for spaces and gaps, and that's when they will, try to get into an attic area. It's best to let professionals deal with it if they do get inside the home. And we can always offer tips on deterrents and things you can try. Sometimes just a radio in your attic is enough to make her move out. So, and just seeing one on your roof doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem. It might just be gone the next day. And our other favorite urban critter, the striped skunk. And honestly, these guys are the cutest things ever, but not everybody appreciates them. They are excellent for grub control, for garden pests. I mean, that's their main thing. They have very leathery paws, so leathery pads on their feet. They actually will ground nesting wasps. They can actually, pick them up or crush them, step on them, stamp on them, and eat them. So they do rid our world of other kinds of pests. Skunks have absolutely no odor, but if they are frightened, they will use their talented spray mechanisms. They do have two glands that they can spray liquid that is quite pungent, as we know, and actually the odor can carry for many kilometers. So if you're in real close proximity, it can be, very kind of a nasty thing. And they don't like to spray. They will give you an opportunity to remove yourself from the area by stomping their feet. It usually happens very quickly, and if you don't retreat, then they may have to spray. But generally, they don't like to. They don't like to spray where their den sites are. They don't enjoy it any more than anyone else. It's just that they run into so many other skunks trying to get into their den sites, raccoons, and all kinds of competition out there. So in the city and today in the shelter, it was very, very skunky smelling. Again, they are nocturnal and they can be a rabies vector species, but generally it's distemper that we see, or at least something similar or neurological. And they're single parents. Raccoons are single parents. Squirrels are single parents. So if there is an orphaning situation, then it is important that they do get some help. And the little ones are like raccoons are born very hairless and helpless, and within a few weeks, 8 weeks, they're out with mother. And again, if you have a shed in your backyard, that is a prime location for a skunk to burrow. They are excellent at burrowing and digging holes, not so great at climbing. They cannot climb. So if they fall into a window well or something like that, they just cannot get out. So they do need our assistance somehow. But most people don't even realize they have a skunk living under their shed until one day they look out and the babies, again, when they're a little teenage age, they might come out and they just frolic around on the lawn like kittens. And then if you scare them, they'll run back under the shed. And then eventually they are going out with mother and she'll disperse them in the fall. So we did cover most of their behavior. If you do see a lone skunk out, like the raccoon, they could be out. It could be a nursing mother who just needs to get more food before to feed her young and to feed herself. But more often than not, a skunk out in the daytime, unless it's a baby or an orphan, and even then, it could be sick. So that would be a time to contact animal services, and we can go and check the situation out. Everything is cyclic. This year seems to be a very popular year, a high cycle year for skunks. So we're getting a lot of calls. February is breeding season for skunks. So that's when you get a lot of spraying. We get a lot of phone calls in February about skunk spraying because they are running into mates that they maybe are not interested in, and there's a lot of fighting and rivalry. So you do get a lot of spraying at that time, and then everything kind of settles down while they're denning. Skunks are also very nearsighted, so they don't really have a great eyesight. So, it's when we actually have to go and rescue them, we are talking to them quietly and just so they know we're there. And, we sometimes we have to release them out of live traps and things like that and just try not to upset them too much. And again, they do run into trouble. So one of our biggest pet peeves in the rescue world is all of the fast food containers or things that have holes in them that they get their heads stuck in. It can actually do damage to their to the skunk itself. And raccoons, skunks are notorious because they have the very pointy conical nose. They get their heads right in there, and then of course they're wandering around with these things on their head. Last year we just had so many calls for. Seems like a lot of people are using those kinds of cups now with the little sort of collared end on them. In a window well, you can put a plank in as long as it's at a 45-degree angle and it's wide. If it's a narrow piece of wood or it's at a 90-degree angle, there's no way they're going to get out. They can actually burrow out of a window well, but I don't think most people want them to, and it's going to take them some time. So we can pop them out of the window wells. They might spray. That's the only downside to that. And certainly, if you have things around the yard, it's always good to put things away and not have netting and obstacles for them. Pools are not a very good thing for skunks either. So please call us if you wake up one morning and you have some kind of animal stuck in your pool. We can pop it out for you. Now, these are some of the animals I believe we have in lights. So we just wanted to talk today about the short-tailed weasel. We do have mink and weasels, pardon me, in Mississauga. So these are very interesting little creatures and very tiny. They're also known as an ermine or a stoat. And their coats change color in the winter, so they go completely white, but they keep that little black dot on the tail. They are ferocious little hunters. Their main diet is mice and voles and that kind of thing, but they will take on a rabbit. And I mean, they're tiny, tiny little guys. And sometimes, I don't know if we do have some info. So sometimes we will, get a call from someone and they've got a rabbit in the yard and for some, well, they actually, the way they kill the animal, they actually eat the head first. So sometimes we'll get calls from distressed people who thinks, somebody's doing bad things to rabbits, but most likely it was a weasel or a mink. And so yeah, it's not so nice if you find something like that in your yard, but that's nature doing its thing. Generally, again, they'll take on almost anything. And they are part of the skunks are part of the weasel family, and you get the same sort of behavior. So the stamping of the feet. They also have a musk gland, and they can eat a third of their own body weight at one time. And they also cache their food. So apparently, they can have these huge larders that are beyond anything they would even, you know, possibly get to and get to eat because they are such successful hunters. But you would rarely see one. I don't know that we've ever had one actually even in the shelter. They are born small and helpless, but at 8 weeks of age, they're out hunting, like believe it or not. And our little top guy in the picture with a vole, that's you can see the size difference, and one that's sort of in mid change of coat on the bottom there. So again, very very beneficial for rodents. They do a lot of cleanup so that we don't have overpopulation of rodents. Speaking of rodents, Um, we have two squirrels and two types of squirrels, I should say. The eastern gray squirrel and the red squirrel. So very, very different animals, and they are nature's acrobat. There's no doubt about that. They also can become an issue, and with people if they have them trying to build a den site in their attic or somewhere they're not really appreciative of. They are part of the rodent family, so their teeth are constantly growing. The gray squirrel can actually have two color phases, so the gray or the black. Generally, they would these leaf nests you see would be their wintering area, and they keep quite warm in there. Also, for their warmth, they need their tail. The tail is for balance, talking to other squirrels, signaling to other squirrels, and they chatter and vibrate their tails. And also for warmth, they need the tail. They rehabbers have told us if a squirrel is missing its tail, because they can sort of slough off if a predator grabs them. Um, they won't survive. So it's really important that they have those fluffy tails. And most people are not happy when they're digging up their bulbs and flowers in the springtime, but there's other things they eat. They also need proteins and calcium, so they do eat, deer antlers that fall off. Those are all things that a squirrel would take advantage of, and keeps the teeth trimmed, but also provides them with that nutrition. So if squirrels are just eating peanuts and nuts and things, it's not always a good thing because they're not eating the types of things they need to eat to be healthy. So it's something to be aware of if you are providing peanuts and things. They also need to eat their natural food, which if we fill up with other things, they're not going to do that. So we want to make sure we're not going overboard on things. And predators, they have lots and lots of predators. Red squirrel, very different, much smaller. And anyone who has had the opportunity to see a red squirrel can usually watch them put the run on the eastern gray squirrels. They are small, but they're very feisty. And if you do start feeding them, they are one of the more aggressive squirrels that may start chewing screens or trying to get into your house to get more food if you suddenly decide to stop feeding them. They are a native squirrel, and they, unlike the eastern gray, they do have only one litter a year, and they also cache their food, so they'll have a whole big stash that they can take advantage of in the winter time as well. Um, where are we? Oh, the opossum. So the Virginia opossum. How are we doing on time? Um, these
Oh,
are one of the most. Are we good?
so yeah, we're
These.
good. We're good.
Okay. These are one of the most unusual creatures, and they do say that they probably migrated up from the southern states, and they have a lot of interesting biological things that scientists and things aren't even really, or biologists, I guess, are really not even sure what why they do what they do. But let me just see where we're at here. They are marsupials, so they do have a prehensile tail. They don't hang from trees by their tail, but they can use it as an appendage to move around on tree branches and things. The female, again, a single mother, but she does carry her babies in a pouch, and the little babies are like the size of a honeybee when they're born. It's only a 2-week gestation period, and then she can look after up to 13 little ones in there, and they're in there for about 40 days, and then after that, or 60 days, a couple of months, and then for a month, over a month, they're out and about with her, and then they would disperse. I'm sure most of them don't make it to adulthood. They are very slow moving. We have people who, unfortunately, they'll see them in the backyard and their pet has attacked them or something. They're also from the southern states, so it's they really they can do okay in the winter as long as they have a warm place that they can go back to and sort of protect themselves. But if we get super cold weather, they are very susceptible to frostbite with their tails, their feet, and their ears actually have no real hair on them, so they can be in distress. And here's some of the fascinating facts. They do have the most teeth, even though they're not a mammal. They are marsupial, but they do have the most teeth. And that's the picture in the bottom there is a little guy. What they do is they will actually just show you all those teeth and try to scare you away. And if that doesn't work, then they might freeze and play dead. And it's a biological condition. It's not something they choose to do. It just happens. They're so frightened and they just keel over, and they can stay that way for up to 4 hours. And they also can release a bad smelling odor, so that predators come along and just think, "Oh my gosh, that's not touching that," and that they kind of stay safe that way. It's a great trick, but unfortunately, doesn't always work. Um, so they can, fall prey to other animals. But I thought one of the most interesting facts was they are eaters of ticks, and they said one of the things I was researching said 5,000 ticks a season. So I don't know who counts, but apparently they are great tick eaters. So that's very beneficial to us here. And they apparently are immune to most snake venom, which I did not know. So I learned something, and that's what I love about wildlife. A coral snake apparently is the only snake they are not immune to, and they rarely carry rabies. And again, researchers and biologists really don't know why they can. It's just they really don't seem to be susceptible to rabies. And on to our beaver. So beavers, is very interesting animal. We don't see them very often in Mississauga, but when we do, because we are such a urbanized area, they don't really have, there's not really a lot of habitat left where they can set up shop and build a dam and flood out, all the homes. So it's kind of one of those things where we really have to, we're looking at alternative ways to kind of, have them here. For the most part, we don't have the habitat that they can stay, so they leave. They can travel great distances looking for territory, and unfortunately they cross roadways and things, so we've had to help them with getting across busy roadways. They are the largest or second largest rodent in the world, next to the capybaras. So when we have to pick them up, they are extremely strong, and we have to be very careful. They can also be very aggressive. I mean, they're just defending themselves, but they do have very large front teeth that also continually grow. So those are for, you know, uh, for the trees that they're chewing. They are primarily nocturnal. So you rarely may not see it. You might wake up in the morning and there's all these trees that are being gnawed on, and then the beavers is off sleeping somewhere. So, and they actually build, homes, lodges for the winter months and live in those with their family. And it's actually interesting. The lodges have two compartments. So they have like a dry off compartment and then the sort of homey part. So they're very, very interesting creatures. And of course, yes, they're only second to humans for manipulating their environment. It's very important, the dams that they make for erosion and the wetlands they create, and everything evolves over time. And even after an abandoned sort of wetland can turn into meadows and very rich soils. And so they do play an important role with our environment as well. And they have some interesting features in that they are a mammal, but they can submerge for 15 minutes at a time, and their ears and nose are adapted so that they close when they're underwater, and they have a third eyelid. So it's like, when they can go underwater and see and wearing goggles. They are monogamous pairs. They mate for life. The kids that they have are with them for 2 years, but it's amazing they can swim after 24 hours. They're born, the babies can swim after 24 hours, and they're weaned at about 2 weeks, but they stay like a bear, similar to a bear, where they stay with the parents until for that 2 year period. And some of their favorites are aspen, willow, maple, and poplar. If you do have an issue with them chewing, like maybe you back onto sort of a natural area and they come up and they take down some trees, usually they will move on, but you can wrap trees. There's painting stuff that you can put on the trees, and generally they don't stay, anywhere in Mississauga too long because it's just not suitable habitat. And moving on, we're almost through here. Just talking a little bit about bats, and um, we have many different species of bats here, and one of the most common is the big brown bat, but there was also the small brown bat that was very common at one time, and now they are on the endangered list. So they roost in trees, but generally they're social. Little brown bats have large colonies that they roost in. They can be a rabies vector species. We don't see a lot here, but that's, something to consider. The biggest thing about bats is how environmentally friendly or, beneficial they are, in the fact that they can eat like 1,000 insects a night, for one bat. So that's just, it's so important when you think about um, the loss of these different species, and the fact that they are one of the most diverse mammals in the world is very interesting. They use echolocation to hunt, of course, and a lot of people are afraid of bats because there's always the myth about they're going to get caught in your hair and that kind of thing. They can navigate their areas, their airspace very, very readily. There's really that's really not an issue. Uh, one of the one of the issues with the little brown bat is because they do live in these colonies during their hibernation period, is they spread it's called white nose syndrome, and this disease is spread throughout the colonies and just kills off massive amounts. They go into a torpor state, a hibernative state, and it wakes them up from that, and because there are no insects to eat, they just will die from that simple fact alone. And the fact we've lost 90% of the population of the little brown bat is really kind of scary. So if we pick them up, we've been alerted by the ministry, and it's a very highly contagious disease. So they don't want them released. They can't be released. They have to be euthanized, which is unfortunate. But it's to save the greater good, um, and it's really something that they can't cure. So yeah, I don't think we've had any that we've picked up, but it's we have to be aware of it as well. And they are very, they're very tiny, and they little brown bat probably couldn't even get its mouth around a finger, whereas the big brown bat probably could. So again, very beneficial species that is has severely declined. So that's kind of concerning. And I think our last one is going to be our owls. So we have many owls in Ontario and Canada, but these are some of the more common ones. So we have the great horned owl here, a little great horned owl fledgling. And story behind that guy was somebody was out in the woods with their dog off leash and found him and decided that he was orphaned. And unfortunately, they didn't know where they had found him from. So we had to take him to a rehab, but he would have been quite fine. He's at the stage where he's jumped out of the nest. He's on the ground, and the parents would have come and fed him, but he was taken away from his family. So I'm just going to talk briefly about things we can do to prevent that kind of thing from happening. Owls, again, fascinating information, and I learned some things as well. And the fact that they have the tubular shaped eyeballs, and they're actually, they don't have the ability. I knew they didn't have the ability to move them, but that's why they can turn their head, and they've adapted. Adaptations are just incredible. The fact that they can fly silently, their feathers are actually ridged and kind of serrated, so they can fly silently when they're hunting. Um, and that they can actually, some hunt in the day, some hunt in the night. Most of them are nocturnal, and their feet, zygodactyl feet, so they can actually turn their toe forward to help them walk when they want to, but it actually helps them, hold their prey, grasp their prey properly, or well. And their ears. I didn't know they could have ears at different heights on their heads, so they'll have one just slightly. They're not aligned like ours are, so just so they can hear, rodents at different levels, which was really really interesting as well. The great gray owl, we actually did have one here in Mississauga, which is not a normal territory, but the fact that they do run into issues when they're moving around, and we were able to take it to a rehab. It actually had a collision with a vehicle, so it was something that we were able to help, which was great. The fact they live almost 30 years in some species and can fly 80 kilometers an hour is amazing. And the fact they have different, everybody thinks about owls hooting and that kind of thing, but they shriek, they whistle, make all kinds of weird sounds. The saw-whet owl was named after, they thought it sounded like a wet saw making a noise. So it's very interesting. So here's some of the owls that we have had through animal services. The great gray owl on the bottom there, the big guy, he was the one that had the collision with a vehicle. Just an amazing animal, like bird. It was just incredible. And we're glad that we were able, he had a fractured pelvis actually, and he had to have surgery and go to a wild bird clinic. Snowy owls, we've had on the bottom left. We've had here, sometimes they're not doing so well. They might have difficulty getting prey, so it might be starving. We have hydro wires, all kinds of things that they could run into that might present a problem for them. And we got the barred owl, the long-eared owl top left, the screech, the saw-whet, and the great horned owl on the far right. The saw-whet owl, we get calls as baby owls, but they're actually just tiny owls along with the screech that's next door. Endangered owls is, unfortunately, the barn owl is, well, they say they're down to 5 known pairs in Ontario, which is very sad. They are, a beautiful bird, and unfortunately, with the loss of habitat, they apparently are also fairly susceptible to road mortality, flying along roadways for rodents and fields, and they get struck by vehicles. And yeah, five pair left. They don't have the longest lifespan, and they are predated by raccoons and other things that will climb in and take the young or the eggs, that kind of thing. So very sad to see that they're not doing so well. They're also not great in a colder climate, so they need the southern Ontario. We really don't have any great habitat down here, and old barns are either falling down or being taken down. So they always return to the same nesting site. So if it's gone, it's a bit of a problem for them too. Short-eared owl, spotted owl, that's British Columbia, but short-eared owl is a species of concern. And I don't believe we've ever had one here through the shelter. So just quickly, and I know I got to wrap up here, right? This is spring is coming. So I want to just, we have territorial behavior in the top corner there. If you get birds that are smacking at your window or trying to, your car, it could be your home. It's usually a territorial male who, for a couple of weeks, will just continually bash himself against a window, thinking it's a rival male. Just simply put something outside on the window or cover it up so he can't see his reflection. That usually takes care of it. We have nesting season for ducks and geese. So, geese get very aggressive when they're nesting. You can often put just a little barrier so they can't see you. And because oftentimes it's areas that people aren't really using. And then that, we all come to work and there they are. And we have so many calls for what people think are orphaned rabbits, fawns, squirrels, baby anything, please, please, please call a wildlife center. Toronto Wildlife Center is amazing. They will troubleshoot what's going on with the animal before it's removed so that they can get it reunited with a parent before it becomes an orphan, because they are loaded with bottle feeders in April. So they cannot accept anymore. So the goal is to get them right back to the parents. And we won't really have time to go into these guys, but just basically what I was saying, fawns, do not touch them, do not remove them. The doe leaves the fawn there, it's born odorless. And we have, sometimes people will take it and bring it home and then call us. So really, really important to talk to a rehab center if you think the animal's in trouble. Obviously, if there's any serious injuries or things, animal services can assist. Cottontail rabbits, absolutely same thing. People think that they're orphaned or abandoned. Mom only comes to feed them a couple times a day. You might not ever see the mother, but if they're healthy and in their little nest, they're probably fine. That. As far as helping wildlife, building gardens and that attract butterflies and hummingbirds, covering your windows so that bird strikes in the spring and fall when we have migration season. We pick up so many songbirds and beautiful warblers and all kinds of different birds that have hit a window. So this is actually a very interesting sort of pattern somebody's put on their window. It's really, really helpful. You can get the little hawk silhouettes as well. Bat boxes to encourage bat nesting sites, cleaning up garbage, keeping community clean, so these animals aren't getting hurt, injured, keeping pets indoors. And also that's a little, it's for amphibians in a pool. So if your frogs are hopping into the pool, they actually have a little ramp and they can get out. So they're not drowning in the pool overnight, which is fantastic. And I mean, what could be better than, seeing all these animals and helping them out? There's also all kinds of safe deterrents if you're a gardener and you're really not, hip to having the neighborhood raccoon come and eat your flowers or whatever it is that you can try and are very safe and humane. And quite honestly, prevention is key. So if you have the awareness, keeping your home up to date, making sure everything is taken care of, gardening, make sure it's fenced off, and use your deterrents. Not keeping pet food outside, garbage, pets indoors, and supervising and pets on leash is amazing. And our number one thing, which seems to be a big issue in our parks and green spaces, is people are leaving food, and we don't know why. I'm sure they think they're helping the animals, but what happens is they become habituated, and you have animals like coyotes coming up to people, and it could be a dangerous situation. So please, please, please do not put food out in the parks. Build your wildlife garden, do the things that you can. Look up online what's friendly and what you're able to do. There's lots of things you can do to help wildlife without putting food outside. So, and that's it. So I
Yeah,
will,
wow.
sorry,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Let's see
Yeah.
here. Okay, well, we can that you went through such a huge list. Thank you so much. I know I kind of sent you my whole laundry list of urban wildlife in Mississauga because we have these lights on display at the Bradley Museum of some of our local wildlife. So the weasels and the beaver, and um, that was just so great to see and to learn more about. Thank you so much for putting all of that together.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, we have had a bunch of questions come through in the Q&A. So I'll start asking some of those, but for anyone else who has a burning question for Linda, please do pop that into the Q&A and we'll do our best to get to it. We're gonna go till 8:30 tonight.
Mm.
So one of the questions that we got was about red squirrels. Are they quite rare? That was someone
They are
curious.
definitely rarer than the eastern gray squirrels. So
Mhm,
they're not rare in the sense that they would be considered like a species of concern or anything like that. But habitat wise, yes, they do prefer like forests and not so developed that we have. So they're rarer, I suppose, in an urban setting where we have really densely populated houses.
mhm. But we can you can spot them in Mississauga still if you're going to those
Absolutely.
forested areas. Yeah, that's great. Um, so you mentioned, if people see an animal that's in trouble, that you think is sick or hurt or needs help, you said we should get in touch with you. What is the best way to get in touch? Should we just call 311 or
That's a good
what do you
question.
think?
311, actually, we have a main dispatch number, which is our best 24/7 number. So I didn't actually, I should have included a slide with our contact information. But for anyone who's listening, I can give you that number. And if you have a pen handy, it's 905 896 5858. So that's our main dispatch number. And our first option is for sick or injured animals. Just press one. And if you forget that, I mean, if that's not something you have, just 311 is good. 311 is great, but they're
Mm.
only answering phones till I believe it's like 7 o'clock or something. And we're 24/7 for rescue. So it's good to have
Wow.
the number and you can call and
Well, that's amazing. I didn't know you were 24/7. That seems rare. So thank you for that. That's fantastic. Um, we also got a question about, okay, raccoons, specifically about raccoons, those rascally raccoons. Um, they tend to leave feces around, including along fences. This person says, I understand their poop can be very toxic. How do you deter them from coming back and leaving droppings at the same spot over and over?
Good question. There was a deterrent slide there, and I had one of the things you can try is a radio, just on a low um, volume, like it sounds like somebody's out there talking, and you can use like in combination with some clothing on a chair or something that smells very sweaty and human. However, most raccoons are very used to human scents. But the low volume talking station just sounds like somebody's out there, and sometimes that can they'll avoid that area. If that's not feasible, there are those there it's called cat scat mats, but
Hmm.
they're plastic, and you can actually get them at dollar stores. There's little kind of they just kind of have it sounds terrible, little spikes, but they don't walk on them. So it's not that
Mhm,
it's dangerous or that it's going to harm them, but you can sort of spread those out along that area that they're using and they will avoid those areas hopefully.
mhm. That's helpful.
Even yeah, noise deterrence or even things that are kind of moving around. Sometimes they'll avoid those areas too.
Yeah, we have some raccoons that like to hang out on the third floor of the big old house that we live in, and
Yeah.
we were told if you put a dish of water out near where they're pooping, they're very clean. They're like pigs. They don't want to go where their food is.
Oh,
But
great.
I
Great
don't know
tip.
that we had too much luck with that here, but maybe somebody else will have luck with it. So that
Oh,
would be
that's interesting. I've never heard that.
yeah.
If it
Um,
works, that's fantastic.
it's worth giving it a shot. I mean, I
Mhm.
really appreciate how you shared some of the signs of how to tell when an animal's not too happy that you're hanging out around them, like the skunk stomping their feet. That's a good clue to just give them their space and be respectful. Um, and I also appreciated the story about well the skunks that they may be raising their young under a shed for a little while, but then they'll take off when they're done raising their young. So those are very helpful things to keep in mind. So we're trying to live in peaceful coexistence with our wild neighbors. Um, we also had somebody ask if you could recommend any videos of Mississauga's wildlife out in the parks, in the ravines, gullies, woods, etc. I don't know if that's a resource that Animal Service provides, if you have any of that kind of video footage of animals at play, or if there's anywhere you could recommend that we look, aside from YouTube, maybe.
Yes, there's all kinds of video footage on YouTube with animals, and Toronto Wildlife has some great video as well. Different rehab centers, a lot of their release material is there. We do not have that. Actually, we're looking for that as well,
Yeah.
and we ask or encourage people if they do have good photos or footage, if they're willing to share with us, that's fantastic. Um, but yeah, unfortunately, I don't really have a good resource to direct you to other than a rehab center that may have some, fantastic footage.
Mm-hmm. That's it's funny, that's one of those things that we're really looking at developing now since the pandemic is we realize, oh, we've got to communicate these things on digital platforms, so we better start collecting this. So, um, yeah, I think having our citizen wildlife enthusiasts share that with us would be really great. We'll have to
Yes,
see what
yes,
happens with that. But a lot of those photos that you shared looked like they were taken here in Mississauga. Was that the
yes.
case?
Yes. Yeah, a
Mm,
lot of them are either taken by we actually are now trying to gain footage. Like you had said, we're trying to, have this footage available, and we just actually hope to have, I don't know if it's posted, but we do have a hawk release that we were able to film. And so that's our goal, is we're trying to have the ability to go out, have the people go out and actually film some of the rescues and releases that we're able to do. And this particular hawk was caught in some netting, and we were able to untangle it and obviously re-release it, which was great. So
mm,
definitely need more, more of that footage. And we do have on our online coyote reporting, we do have a mechanism for attaching photos and videos. So that's been wonderful and foxes. That's how some of the fox and coyote pictures that we have been collected.
perfect. That's great. And we had someone said, as far as this animal footage you're looking for, put the word out on Twitter. So that seems to be where the
Oh, good
wildlife
idea. Good
enthusiasts
thinking.
are.
Thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you for that. Um, we actually didn't get questions about coyotes, which I thought that would be a hot topic. So um, but that's interesting. I had a question about coyotes. I did see a pair of them in Mississauga in the summer. They crossed Burnham Thorpe Road. And when I first saw it, I thought it was somebody's orange, like golden retriever that was off leash, just walking around. And it took a minute before I thought, no, that's not a dog, that's a coyote. And I was really surprised at that orange color of it. What what does that mean when it's orange? I think of them as being gray. Is it a younger coyote? I don't know.
No. Well, that's a great question. It's funny you say that, you bring that up, and I was going to mention that they do come in different colors, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Um, there are some color variations, and one of them is the gold
Mm,
coat, which is fairly rare, yet in Mississauga we seem to have several pairs, and one is gold. The one picture with the two, there was one that was more gold. And recently, a resident sent in a photo, and this, you again, like you said, you would swear it was a dog almost, the coloration, which was really unusual. But the biologists say that it is a rare color, but I think there might be some of that genetic pool in Mississauga because we seem to have several that
Oh,
are more orange that we see because of the fact they're territorial. One that we did pick up, unfortunately, it had been hit by a car, was black,
oh
which
my gosh.
in all my time I had never seen a black one, but it was part of their, again,
Mm.
very rare, but it does happen where they have an overproduction of melanin and it just turns the coat black. And so, yeah, they do come in different colors. I mean, you do see your typical colors, but don't be surprised if you see a variation.
That's very helpful. Just not don't take it for granted. You just gotta remember things can look different sometimes than what you'd expect. Make you look twice. We had a really great little anecdote shared in the Q&A that I will share with you. This lady says, I've seen beavers down here in Port Credit. They chomp down smaller trees along the Credit River at the back of the Port Credit Memorial Park. I was lucky enough one day to see one emerge from the Credit River and walk across the sidewalk in front of me, grab a branch, and then go back into the river. So we do have beavers here. Wow.
Oh,
That's
that's amazing.
quite the bold little beaver there.
Yeah,
So we'll have to look for them at Port Credit Memorial Park for anyone who's tuning in. You might be able to see them there.
there you go.
And this person also shared that they've seen muskrats swimming in the little streams at Rattray Marsh, but hasn't spotted beavers at Rattray Marsh yet. So,
Ah, very interesting. Yeah,
mhm.
actually, muskrats kind of, I mean, they were very common. And then as we developed the city, they kind of, we personally did not get any calls as animal services. They just sort of were off the radar too, but we are seeing them come back. So, it's
Yeah,
interesting how everything evolves too. So that's really interesting.
yes. Um, it is. I live near the Humber River, and I saw two beavers in the Humber River this summer, and I was like, "What's going on there? What?" So I wonder if the pandemic and people staying home and the streets quieting down a lot, if that sort of encouraged wildlife to come back and stay back. Um,
I
we
think
did
it's definitely made a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and on that note, we did have a question about the lifespan of foxes. That's the one of the first ones you shared with us, and it did seem like their lifespan is very short. Could you
Yeah.
speak to that? What's happening there?
It's probably more disease and predation is one, and for foxes in the city, it's probably more vehicular, accidents that happen. But they are, predated on by owls and coyotes are probably one of the main predators for the red fox. So, yeah,
Okay,
it's or disease. I mean, that was one of the highest issues with red foxes when rabies was a concern, but right now
mhm,
it seems to be relatively under control and rare in the fox populations down here.
okay,
So,
yeah, I did. I did encounter a mangy fox in Oakville back when I used to work in
uh,
Oakville, and we had the animal services folks come out and they got the fox. But you shared some tips for how we can support wildlife, such as having bat boxes um, and keeping our houses in good shape. Is there anything that we can do to help prevent disease with our urban wildlife population, or is that just something we can just leave it to the experts and know that they're taking care of it?
good question. I mean, disease is a natural sort of order of things, and it's actually part of a healthy ecosystem so that you have nature's way of sort of taking out the weak or compromised, immune compromised animals. And one of the biggest issues with disease is feeding. And
Mm,
you have, bird feeders, for instance, they can pick up salmonella, botulism, different things. If you start seeing birds around a bird feeder and they're dying and there's no apparent reason, it's best to remove the bird feeders just in case there happens to be an issue. So it's important that if we are trying to help them, that we're actually helping them. Um, and cleaning bird feeders and disinfecting them and making sure that we're not promoting any of that kind of issue. If you do have ducks congregating in a large sort of area and geese and they're all feeding, well, there's a large amount of feces in the water, and so
mm,
these kinds of things are where when animals gather unnaturally or in large, large sort of numbers, that can actually promote disease within the species. So we sound like the bad guys when we say, don't feed and
mm,
don't do this, but it's more about the health of the animals and preserving the enjoyment so that we're not causing causing issues within. Last year we had an enormous amount of waterfowl with fishing line and fishing lures. And I don't know if it was a COVID
mm,
activity where everyone went out and went fishing, but we just had never had a year like that with wildlife that was struggling with all these different things. So it's hard to get these messages out. I would reach out, to anyone. Certainly, social media. We try, to get as much messaging as we can.
mm.
These are great. So I appreciate you having us out, Elizabeth, because
Yeah.
we like to talk to these kinds of things because awareness is key. We just need, if people don't know what issues are happening, then we don't know how to resolve them. And
Mhm,
feeding is one of our biggest challenges. And, we don't want to see the animals getting sick. We don't want to see them approaching people or, coyotes going after people's dogs and that kind of thing. And if
mm,
if we sort of artificially support them, then number one, there's going to be more of them, and there's going to be more disease, and there's going to be more conflict. So we
mm.
have to kind of let those animals take care of themselves, which is very important.
That's a really, really great takeaway. Thank you. It's so hard to resist. I know
I
people
know.
will feed the ducks and that's something they love to do, and it's like, "Oh, but that's not just look at the ducks."
Exactly.
Ducks
Take
don't feed.
pictures.
Take
Take
pictures.
pictures.
Yeah, still they'll be happier that way in the long run. Um, one final thought here that I just wanted to share was we actually had someone else see an orange coyote, but it was on Lakeshore in Marie Curtis Park.
Mhm.
And he noticed that it was in a pair with a more gray coyote, and one had a tracking collar on.
Oh,
So that's in the Toronto, um, not
yes, it is.
district, but that's under their yeah, authority there. And so I wonder if they're tracking that one of those orange coyotes. It's interesting.
Yes, yes. And actually they are coloring some. So we have some in Mississauga and they may move a little bit. But yeah,
Yeah,
they don't recognize the boundaries, so who knows?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. They get around. Wow, Linda, this has just been such a treat. Thank you so much again for sharing all this incredible information with us. It's been really helpful. We've had a lot of people as well express their appreciation and say it's just such a nice way to spend the evening. So thank you
Oh,
so
wonderful.
much.
Thank you.
And I guess if there's more information out there from Mississauga Animal Services, is there any a website or anywhere that we should look for that?
Yes, we're under the city's website, but we're right at the top and just the first scroll down. I think it's under services and animals
Hmm.
and pets is number one. So you
Perfect.
can go on there. We have wildlife information, information about our shelter, our services, and all of our contact information.
Amazing. That's fantastic. And is there anything else you'd like to add or any requests for us before we sign off for the evening?
No, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity. And certainly, if anyone would like to send us photos and
Mhm.
share them, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the more people we have, advocating for wildlife and helping people understand that they can survive in a city on their own and that kind of thing. I think more awareness is fantastic. So I thank everyone for joining us tonight.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Linda. Um,
Thank you.
we're gonna end our evening there. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We've still got a few people hanging on, so do enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you'd like more information, please email museums@mississauga.ca or visit us at museumsofmississauga.com. And do stay safe, uh, stay home, save a life, take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.